Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, I imagine you're kind of getting sick of me showing these maps, but I find them quite intuitive. And again, I'm just giving you an update here. Through March 1st, so from the beginning of the year through March 1st, you can see in every single climate reporting district across the country where they rank on the 129 years worth of data we have for precipitation. And clearly our eye is drawn to the Carolinas here, where we have a lot of single digits representing the wettest, top 5, top 10 wettest start to the year. And if I could just show you the month of February, this next map just looks at February. Look at this north central region right in through here, having its wettest February on record. That's 129 years worth of data. Now, in the overnight hours, we watched storms that were in parts of the Mid-South stretching back to Texas, and then early this morning on Monday, we saw the rain from that coming across parts of North Carolina. Interesting little bands here of showers as they moved across the state, adding more rain to these rainfall totals. So the big questions we have to ask are, how much more are we anticipating? Is there going to be any relief in sight? What are the temperatures going to do, and how's it going to kind of get us started with this 2021 growing season? So last 72 hours, total accumulated precipitation. This was through 8 a.m. East Coast time, and we certainly see that here as you get, only the very south and southeast edge of the state missed out on the rainfall here when we look back over the last 3 days, and some of this coming this morning here. But widespread, 3/4 of an inch to some places here, well over 1.5 inches as you get back toward the Appalachian Mountains. Just so you know, there's widespread flooding in parts of West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, back into Arkansas, and northern parts of Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia, where there's been very heavy rainfall in the Tennessee and Ohio valleys back to the mid-south here. But our last 7 days recovered in terms of temperatures overall across the United States after the Arctic outbreak we endured from February 4th to about the 20th. So from the 21st to the 28th here, more mild conditions prevailed across the midsection of the country. So it's time to start looking at these maps again. And what you're looking at here is growing degree day units. I use a base of 50 degrees and a max of 86, so this is the corn calculation. And we can see that from the 15th of February through the 27th, we're generally sitting here at about 20 to 40 GDUs having been accumulated. But it's always instructive to see this compared to normal, and we see that we're close to normal, but a little bit cooler than average across the southern tier of the state, which is why we see below normal values there. But just take a look at this. Across much of the peanut and the cotton belt, getting back over here to the south, because of that colder air that was in place in the cool shot we're going to start off the week with down here in Texas, not picking up any additional GDUs as we get started out here in this new month of March. Now, given that we're in March, we know that March is a very volatile time period. It's a time period of adjustment. It's where we move toward the spring equinox. The sun angles are getting higher, and the jet stream, which is ultimately this boundary in the atmosphere between where it's warm and where it's cold, okay, but it's aloft, it tells us what the weather is going to do. And I'm going to fast forward you to the end of this week. Now, if you notice this, a very strong bit of the subtropical jet stream is curling down here through Texas over into parts of the southeast, but the flow in the polar jet splits right there. Now, as everything comes together over the east, we need to see what that means for precip, but unfortunately, seeing troughs on this side of the country means that as we go toward the end of this week and into the weekend, we're going to be seeing some cooler than normal conditions. I'll give you those actual temperatures in a few moments. That will likely extend in early next week, but there is a significant change happening, and it's on the other side of the U.S. It's right here. You see the merger of the polar jet and the subtropical jet are happening here along the west coast. And we see that this deep trough is kind of pulling here into the North Atlantic. So we're going to have the cooler weather that's going to be in place into early next week. And we'll see what the precip looks like. But in fact, let's just do that real quick. Fast forwarding right now through the next 7 days, through the next Sunday evening, we do see that much of the southeast is quite wet, including South Carolina. But as you get into North Carolina, it's all going to be about the trajectory of these next few systems that pass through and how far to our south they go. And again, we'll give you those details, but let's compare this to normal here by looking out over the next week at precipitation compared to departures from average. And we can see that overall, despite some of the rainfall that's coming through, it's a drier week according to the European model. Now, drier is relative. We still have a few chances at rainfall, but none of this torrential rain like we had been seeing as of late. So, keeping that in the back of your mind, I want to come back to this pattern idea. Because by the time you get out here to day 10, look at this. This piece right here of the jet stream is both the polar branch and the subtropical branch coming together from Southern California all the way through the Ohio River Valley. Now, given that, we do expect to see a lot of severe thunderstorms across parts of the Mid-South, across parts of southern Texas, getting all the way over to the East Coast. And this is going to take the storm track action a bit farther to the north. And we see out here as we go out to day 15, that seems to be the situation that is setting up. What I don't like is that the models, by the time we get to mid-March, are trying to take those strongest winds back farther to the south rather than keeping them in the Ohio River Valley or through the midsection of the country. And why I bring that up is because this brings North Carolina back into the target of having above average precipitation. Now, what you're looking at here just takes you out into week 2. So this would be March 8th through the 15th. So you see where the nose of that jet comes in, and then where it extends, these are the areas that are going to be wet. Now, each of the systems that comes through here and has a track like that, sorry, my drawing's getting a bit messy here, but there will be fronts that get dragged through all the way to the coast. And so I'll take this off here and just show this to you. Even though we try to identify that area as being drier, it doesn't mean we won't have precipitation. And the likelihood of possibly getting, well, when the rain comes through, it being to the tune of strong to severe storms, that's there as well. So that's your big picture. Now let's get into those details I promised. Okay, today, big high pressure cell sitting down here, and that's what's feeding the overrunning on that boundary right there. There is another shortwave on the backside, put an X in it, that we're going to watch for midweek this week to come over and hit North Carolina. There's then this feature that's sitting off the west coast, and that one is also going to cut through and eventually come over as well. But these next two systems don't quite bring in the rainfall totals that we had seen as of late. And that gets us basically through the next week in terms of how much precip we're going to be seeing. All right, so on the all hazards map today, we're in the clear except for some river flooding. Okay, so we don't see any, additional flood watches or flood warnings like you see back here in Tennessee, well, northern Tennessee, but Kentucky into West Virginia. But we still got an active pattern to keep an eye on. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We've already seen through about right here. So this gets us through about 9 o'clock this morning. Gosh, the NAM model last night did a fantastic job of that. So scattered showers throughout the day today. We can see this is through 2 p.m., getting through about 5 o'clock this evening. Now, the next system at that point is taking shape over Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana. We get through much of the day on Tuesday on the drier side of things. But as we go, look at this. This is now going to be Tuesday afternoon, getting into Tuesday evening, now into Wednesday morning. The models are bringing back in the overnight hours on Tuesday into Wednesday morning, more scattered showers from that second wave that I just showed you. So now we've got this idea about the first two systems, the one today, the one that's coming through early in the morning on Wednesday. We need to flip over to the European model to see what's happening after that. So we've already seen this second system taking shape right here. So let's pause it midday on Wednesday. Now you notice that that moves offshore by Wednesday evening. And then we go through the day on Thursday and into the day on Friday. Now working our way into the day on Saturday without a whole lot going on. But on Saturday, there's this low that came out of the Colorado Rockies on Friday, dipped down here toward the Gulf Coast early Saturday morning. As we then work our way into the weekend, this is now Saturday midday into Saturday evening, now working our way into Sunday. Do you see how the models wanted to take that system, keep it off the shore, therefore preventing us from getting much rainfall out of it? If this changes at all in its position throughout the week in our forecasts and brings it farther to the north, that'll increase our chances of rainfall here. In the European model, which told you that after the next two events we saw some drier conditions, it would have been wrong, okay? There is a little system right here. See this one coming into the Appalachian Mountains? That snuck out at the end of the week through Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and might possibly put down some light snow in the Appalachian Mountains. But as I play this forward, I'm just going to hit play from here, okay? This goes into early next week, Monday, Tuesday, high pressure's in control, Wednesday. Now look, all the way out to midweek next week, the 10th, this high pressure cell, this is what's preventing us from getting the precip. That high pressure cell is also redirecting systems farther to the north. The jet stream is dug into the south. And now look, California through the Four Corner States into the upper Midwest, a region that is very dry, is now the new kind of target of this precipitation. Are we going to get any snow? Well, like I said, with that system sneaking in at the end of the week, or really in the weekend, we could get some light snow in the Appalachian Mountains, but that's about it that we're going to be thinking about here. And I just want to reiterate, as the systems, the low pressure tracks start coming into this direction, just remember they do bring fronts. We're very well aware of what spring can deliver with those fronts as they pass from parts of the Mid-South over to the Mid-Atlantic. So even though you see the March 8th through 15th showing up dry in the forecast. Not dry, excuse me, drier. It doesn't mean we're going to be out of the woods for not getting some showers and storms. Now look at this. Once I get out there beyond the end of next week, so here we are from the 16th through about the 24th, we see that the pattern goes back. Remember how I showed you the stronger winds shifting south? It goes back to this Tennessee through the Appalachian Mountains kind of storm track. And now that puts us back over into the risk of having above normal precipitation. And I know that is something that none of you want to hear me talk about. But what I want to show you is, as we go through this, how the temperature pattern is going to behave and then what could break down to make this wrong. Let's do that, okay? Temperatures first. Now today is mild, but you can see the cooler air that's on the backside of that front that's coming through. So our high temperatures today are shown here on Monday, but let's watch as we get into the day on Tuesday. Much cooler day for us on Tuesday, 5 to 10 degrees cooler than average with highs in the low 50s. And as we go into Wednesday, it's the same thing. But as we get toward Thursday, that's our more moderate day, but I want to point out something. Look at how warm it is. It's going to be warmer in the Dakotas than it is going to be in parts of the Carolinas here, really North Carolina, as we get into the day on Thursday. Now, I mentioned toward the weekend, there's Friday, getting into Saturday and Sunday. Now we really have that flip-flop right over the weekend, much above average here in the Northern Plains, much cooler than average here along the East Coast. That was when the pattern, remember, split like this, but dove into this broader trough in terms of the jet stream flow across the east. And it seems as though throughout the day 5 through 10, we're going to have to let that exit toward the east here before we start to bring in more mild conditions. But those mild conditions seem to be reappearing once we get out there past March 8th, 9th, and 10th. And therefore, in the day 10 through 15 time period, we see the cooler half of North America is the western half of North America. And with the jet stream pattern still doing that, we're going to be seeing better chances of having more above average temperatures moving forward. Now, looking out here to week 3, so this gets you all the way into March 24th, we see that we continue to favor the above average temperatures with the cooler weather west. And in my last 90 seconds or so here of covering North America, before I go to South America, I want to show you what could go wrong. We're going to start first with the MJO. Now, if the MJO, which is currently in phase 6, pops out into phase 7, 8, and even over into 1, those are not cold phases for North America. If we come down here into phase 2 and 3 at high amplitude, then we start to see a much better relationship between the tropics and the extratropics where we live with cooler weather. But look at what the atmosphere is doing. It's trying to put a large area of subsidence here in the midsection of the Pacific Ocean. And I'll just show you something. We would want rising motion there, historically, if March was going to be really cold. That's what the analogs would say. So it's not in the right configuration to be cold for a long time period. Then we know about these two, right? The Arctic Oscillation, a big high pressure dome here. That's the one that spreads all the cold air that's over the Arctic south, sometimes over North America. If at the same time the Arctic Oscillation goes negative, the North Atlantic Oscillation goes negative, then we have troughs that occupy the East Coast for a while as big ridges build up toward Greenland. And right now the Arctic Oscillation is positive and the North Atlantic Oscillation is positive, which means we tend to see these patterns showing up in the temperatures. Now from there, let's look at the Pacific, because it's important to keep an eye on what's going on in Alaska, for example. The PNA, the Pacific North American pattern. As you see here, PNA briefly comes up toward neutral, then comes back down to negative. It would have to go positive, meaning a big ridge here in the west and a deep trough over the east, for us to be wrong on that day 10 through 15 time period. And the EPO, which watches high pressure over Alaska, well, it's right now positive. You see how it keeps bouncing around in positive territory? It'd have to come way down here in order to break this down, put a big ridge over Alaska and a deep trough over the east. So what I'm telling you is, at least through the next 15 days, maybe even beyond, none of these factors are setting up to take us away from the favoring of more mild conditions after the cooler end of this week, okay? And away from possibly seeing above average precipitation through mid-month. Now from there, I want to talk about South America. And I got asked a great question the other day about Argentina, because there's a lot in the news right now about the Argentinian crop struggling. A week ago, we know that only 24% of the corn crop in Argentina was rated at good to excellent, whereas a year ago, it was over 60%. Now the question was, how big is that growing area? So I kind of overlaid Illinois, Minnesota, Iowa, and Indiana on Argentina just to show you how big it is, how much land area we're talking about. You can see the soybean production map over there on the left. Well, over the last week, there were quite sizable holes, one about the size of Minnesota, another one about the size of Iowa, where no rain was seen, and the temperatures were quite warm compared to normal. And other places, like around Cordoba, scattered showers at best. I saw some reporting stations that picked up about 15 millimeters of rainfall. It's about a half of an inch. But over the month of February, that was about it in terms of rainfall. In Brazil, where they're actively trying to harvest first crop of soybeans and plant safrinha corn, it's been very, very wet, slowing the harvest progress down. And over the next week, it will continue to be very wet in that area, with some places in the next 7 days picking up 2 to 4 inches of rainfall. But you see this hole right here? That's the size of Iowa, Illinois, and most of Minnesota. That's going to miss out on precipitation. In fact, you can see it if I show you the anomalies here, which means we're going to have to watch Argentina carefully in the quality of its crop, because even out into week 2, we continue to see the drier conditions, while Brazil's northern growing areas hang on to wetter conditions. So this is delaying harvest here, and this is degrading the quality of the crop in Argentina. From there is some evidence that the longer term, while the heat does come in, that in the longer term, getting into the 3rd week of March, we could be returning rains here. Now, is that going to be too late to salvage a crop? Well, we're going to watch it carefully, but I do believe that the markets will be telling this story this week when it comes to corn and soybeans. Okay, lots to cover here today. I thank you for giving me a little extra time to talk about South America. Have a good rest of your week, and I'll talk to you again next Monday. Thanks.